Thanks for tuning into On Betrayal of a Nephilim, and of course our special daily UFO report. I think you'll find today's show pretty interesting. Remember, there is a hidden history that has been deliberately obfuscated from the people of the world. So we are talking about the baby mummy skull that we got to unwrap at Senior Juan's History Museum, I think in 2014, 2015, right around there. You'll find more pictures today, and of course I'll be talking more about the very enigmatic baby skull. This is a copy of it by Joe Taylor. But first, a word from our sponsor, Noble Gold. Are you happily putting your life savings on the stock market right now, despite the dangers? If you've been thinking about investing safer so you can retire comfortably and sleep at night, you could do worse than talk to a Noble Gold expert about the tax advantages and other pluses of precious metal IRAs. Of course, you might just love uncertainty, but if you don't, you can get a free America the Beautiful solid silver 5-ounce coin with any qualified plan you start. Call 877-646-5347 or visit NobleGoldInvestments.com. That's NobleGoldInvestments.com. Folks, you know, Noble Gold has been our sponsors for quite some time now, and we thank them for that. But, you know, precious metals, if everything goes south, fiat currency is exactly what it is. It might not even be worth the paper it's printed on. So check it out. Do your own research. NobleGoldInvestments.com. That's NobleGoldInvestments.com. Once again, the number 877-646-5347. If you decide to get gold or silver, the bullion will come right to your door, and you actually have precious metal in your hands. Folks, if you come here looking for politics, prophecy, and a supernatural report, we still do that show, but it's over at Rumble and on Roku. Check it out. Link is right below. So we've been talking about the baby mummy skull, and what you see here is, of course, is a picture of Joe Taylor. Now Joe Taylor from the Mount Blanco Museum, and we actually raised money for Joe because the tornado came in and tore the roof off, and a lot of the it's an unbelievable museum at Mount Blanco, but the tornado came in and tore the roof off, and a lot of rain damage and stuff, and so we helped with that with a GoFundMe place for Joe Taylor, GoFundMe page, I should say, for Joe Taylor. But this is the baby skull right here, and Joe did a one-to-one model of it. You can see this right here. I'll turn it to the side. He got the color pretty close, but as you'll see in the forthcoming pictures, the skull, the colors when we unwrapped the baby skull was just incredible. So let's get right into it. And of course, there's the picture of Joe Taylor, gloves and mask, and he's unwrapping the baby skull. So this is what it looked like pretty much when all the mummy wrappings finally came off of it. Joe's holding it in his hand. And by the way, folks, this is everything I'm showing you today is a shameless plug, but it's from his book, On Betrayal of a Nephilim. It's an oversized book with, I think, like 600 and some odd pages, whatever it is. Yeah, over 600 pages, and lots and lots of photographs. So when I went down there, Richard Shaw, my good friend Rick, set me up with a Canon camera, and I was photographing everything. So overnight I became a photojournalist, as it were. Very interesting. So I miss Rick. So much death. There's Rustin Shelley and Rob Skiba and Richard Shaw. It's overwhelming at times. So here is the baby skull, and we were all taken aback by what we were looking at. Here's another shot, and this photograph really gives you a clear look at the color of the hair, and what astounded us when Joe finally peeled back the last of the mummy wrappings. Let's check that out. And here it is in sunlight for the first time, and you can see the reddish tint to the hair, the yellow and then the reddish tint. It's just unbelievable. So this is right out of the book. We have samples in Peru that are labeled and in paper containers, which are then stored safely in plastic bags. We are awaiting the completion of the paperwork to bring these samples to the United States for testing. With the testing, we will be able to answer the questions of the hair color as well as the mitochondrial DNA. Until the testing is completed, we can only theorize as to what caused the elongated shape of the baby's skull. Are genetics responsible? Are these skulls the remnants of the Nephilim who fled the Levant almost 3,500 years ago? We know several facts up to this point. And remember, this is written in 2014. The Paracas people show up between 3,300 and 3,500 years ago. This fits in the timeline of a conquest of a Levant and the diaspora of the Nephilim tribe. So what's happening here, and this is what's amazing, when Joshua and Caleb come into what's known as the Promised Land, the Levant, all right, there's all these Nephilim tribes that are there. In fact, one of my latest book, How the Nephilim Countermove, How the Nephilim Return After the Flood, gets into all this because there is a hidden history. There's no doubt about it. And there's this very troubling mandate from a loving, holy God that tells Joshua and Caleb to go in and wipe out men, women, children, animals, burn everything. Why is that? Because the genome, in my opinion, because the genome was utterly contaminated. Think about this. In the flood of Noah, the entire planet was wiped out, except for 8 people. Now, why is that? In my opinion, once again, I believe that when the fallen angels came down, they completely corrupted the seed line. They corrupted the genome. They corrupted the genetics. And then there's after the flood, and you say, well, how did they return after the flood? Well, they did what they did the first time. Knowing the penalty of the great sin, they went in and took the women and created hybrid entities. And it is an interesting, and I'll talk about that in the UFO piece right after this, that as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be when the Son of Man returns. Just dwell on that. Out of all the prophecies in the Bible, out of the entire Tanakh, the Old Testament, that Jesus could point to, he points us to that. Why? Why is that so important for us to understand? The past is here, the future is here, they intersect. What happened in antiquity is being repeated in modernity, in my opinion. So, we know that the Paracas people, with these elongated skulls, and I truly believe this is genetic, and I'll talk about this more in depth tomorrow and, of course, Friday, and then we'll wrap it up on Friday. But they show up about 3,500 years ago in Paracas, out of nowhere. There's no pre-existing culture. In other words, they're there for a period of time, they settle in Paracas, and then they just suddenly disappear. And there's lots of different theories on that. There was one section, and maybe if I can find the picture, I'll show it to you tomorrow. It was basically a killing field, very unsettling. Senior Juan and one of the Wakaros took us to this place. I don't believe it's there anymore because roads came in, new roads came in, mining operations, and the graveyard is gone. Last time we were there, much of it had already been plowed over, and also picked clean by the Wakaros, the grave robbers. But it was a killing field. It was on a high place. And we didn't open, but the graves had been opened. And there were no artifacts in them at all. And every single skull, right here, on the left side of the skull, there was a hole. So someone had taken a club and basically hit the side of the skull. There was a gaping hole. Every single skull had that I remember. Every single skull showed blunt force trauma to the side of the skull. No funerary objects, nothing. Nothing was there. And it was a mass grave. We counted about 60 different elongated skulls. That's genocide, in my opinion. And what was incredible, and I've talked about this before, but we had a forensic anthropologist lined up. I won't tell you the guy's name, because at the last minute he weaseled out. We had it all lined up for him to come down to pay the guy 2 weeks. I mean, if you're a forensic anthropologist, this is a dream come true, right? Guy was afraid of losing his career because of his association with us, what we believed in, and the fact that he was dealing with these elongated skulls. Look, if they're nothing more than cranial deformation, cradle head binding, I get that. But if there's something else going on here, we have a right to know what it is. And we've talked about this skull here. We call it the cinnamon skull. And look at the elongation. Look at the eye sockets. And we'll be getting into more and more of this as the week goes on. The Paracas people had intricate textiles, some of which were not duplicated with the same level of sophistication until modern times. Their weave is perhaps the best in all of the cultures throughout history. Where did they get this technology? Who taught them this incredible skill? And moving right along,
there, of course, is the picture, the iconic picture of the baby skull. Notice the size of the eye sockets, how huge they are. When Dr. Jeff Duff, who's our team's optometrist, examined it, he stated on the record that these are at least 25 to 30% larger than a human being, and the pupillary distance is much closer. Instead of 65 millimeters, it's about 45 millimeters, thus enabling, perhaps, these entities to have night vision. Very interesting. Anyway, folks, moving right along, if you want to see all of this, you can basically go to streaming.lamarzulli.net, streaming.lamarzulli.net. Most of this has been in our film, DNA, The Final Results. That's number 6. But you can binge watch all 7 of them by going to streaming.lamarzulli.net. So let's get right into our whole UFO topic. We're talking about alien abductions, and of course, very unsettling. So the Pentagon UFO unit in the Spotlight report mentions off-world vehicles not made on this earth. I say this every day because there's new people coming here. Our government, your government, has stated on the record that the UFO phenomenon is real. What do you do with that? What do we do with that? That information is unbelievable. So moving right along, as in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. Ancient prophecy about 2,000 years, right, in the making. And here we are. Why would Jesus warn us of this? Why would he point to the days of Noah? Out of the entire history of the Bible, why would he go back there and say, hey, it's going to be like the days of Noah? And that immediately begs the question, what differentiates the days of Noah from any other time in all of history? That's the presence of the fallen angelic host. They're doing something that's unthinkable. They are mixing the seed. Their seed, Book of Daniel, their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave with them. If it's not the seed of men, then who is it? Who is it? Who's mingling the seed? I remember the first time I heard that from Chuck Missler, years and years and years ago, and I was just taken aback by that. It's just very astounding. So let's get into this. People are taken. And the experience can be so horrific that they shut down. They don't tell anybody. They hold it in, they hold it all inside. It becomes internalized. Oftentimes they have memories, but the memories are very foggy and disjunct, and they're not sure of what happened. They only know that, gee, I got up and went into my bedroom and I looked at the clock and it was 3 in the morning, and the next thing I woke up lying on the floor, and my pajamas were on backwards, and it was 6 a.m. What happened? And why were my pajamas on backwards? Another great example is, look, they're in the car driving, and they look at the clock, and it's, let's say, 7 p.m., and it's kind of dusk, and it's whatever. There's a bright light. Next thing you know, they come back in the car. 3 hours have gone by. They're 200 miles from where they last were. It's 10 o'clock. They have no memory of anything. Folks, this is real. I remember Al Matthews telling me his story of how he was abducted in his car. And he knows Al Matthews is a lifelong abductee. And so when you're taken, after a period of time, you know that it's going to happen again. I remember in Steven Spielberg's film, Taken, that exactly what happened. One of the protagonists in the film knew. They could tell. They knew exactly. They would, before any lights or craft or anything, they would have that presence, that feeling. I've talked to, and that, of course, is Spielberg's interpretation. But I've talked to abductees, and that's exactly what they tell you. That maybe 30 seconds or a minute before the abduction, they know it's going to happen, and there's nothing that they can do to stop it. Moving right along, this is a picture of the Pascagoula, Mississippi abduction. These 2 guys were out fishing, and they were taken. There's no doubt about it. And I remember talking to Calvin Parker at a recent UFO conference about 3 years ago. Calvin had written the book, and you can see him there. Very young man at the time, about 19 years old. And he's written the book, and I actually had the book signed, and of course it burned in the fire. By the way, the 3rd anniversary of that was yesterday, but our house is almost ready for occupancy, but I digress. So it's 1973, and this is front page news. And I'm in Philadelphia. I'm like 23 years old, but I remember this when the story broke and how people were talking about it. And of course, because it was Pascagoula, everyone was kind of joking, well, they had too much beer, blah, blah, blah. That's not the case. That's not the case. And Parker has written a book very recently about it. That's not what happened. So I remember this vividly when it happened, and people talking about it, and of course different opinions. Most of it was scorn and ridicule. And that's how the UFO subject has been treated literally for decades. People look at it with scorn and ridicule. And if you talked about that, you were ridiculed. Maybe you should get some psychiatric help, right? And even today, after our government has admitted the reality of the UFO phenomena, there's still that ridicule. You really can't talk about it in church circles. You can't. We talk about it here every single day. Why? Because in my opinion, it is the coming great deception and the Luciferian endgame, which gives me Mr. Segue right into our film. It's free. Please check it out. There's so much information. If you haven't seen it, what are you waiting for? It's free, for crying out loud. Maybe I should charge something. Maybe more people would watch it. Last time I checked, we had like 111,000 people viewing it on YouTube. That number should have at least another zero behind it, but it doesn't. So there's a certain ambivalence within the church community, especially if, it's free. I can't do any more than that, right? There is so much information. Al Matthews was abducted multiple times during his life, and you'll find his testimony absolutely riveting. Anyway, folks, thanks so much for watching On the Trail of the Nephilim, and of course our daily UFO report. Remember, we'll see you on the air or in the air. Thanks so much for watching.